members of Congress.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's now take a moment to enjoy a retrospect of some Kapac highlights and precious memories with tonight's special guest, the Honorable Congressman Andy Kim. These are such great memories. Are we going? Okay. Are we done? Good.
Yeah, it just disappeared. I'm sorry.
Okay. I'd like to now introduce to you all 이사장님 Kim Dong-soo, Board Chairman of Kapac, Dr. Chris Kim, who will introduce our special guest this evening.
I'm so proud to introduce our friend Andy Kim. He's our friend and our supporter of one, and I finish about 2 minutes.
Okay. And then Andy goes. And then thank you so much, Congressman Kim, for all the work that you've done on behalf of the Korean American community and for advocating for policy priorities that affect us here in the United States as well as in Korea on the peninsula. And we've received some really great questions from all throughout the United States and Korea. So let's begin. Blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Number one question.
I'd like to start off with a question from attorney Andrew Pak 변호사 from New York, who asks, do you want me to keep going?
Okay.
Okay. Next, we have a two-part question from Kim Gi-soo 기자 from 내일신문 from Korea, who asks, first, blah, 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 blah. And we also have another two-part question from physician Dr. Chris Kim, 이사장님 from Riverside, California. Okay. Next, we have a question from Lee Jong-un, Senior Advisor of the Dosan An-chang-ho Memorial Committee in Riverside, California. Next, we have a question from Chung Yoon-seop, U.S. correspondent of Yonhap News Agency. Next, we have several questions from high school students. First, we'll start off with Kristen Choi from Palisades Park High School in Palisades Park, New Jersey, who's a 10th grader. And she asks, next, we have a question from Andrew Shim from Fort Lee Academies in New Jersey, who's in 11th grade. And we have a question from Ashley Yim, 11th grader from Ridgewood High School in New Jersey. And finally, our last question will be directed from the speaker, from Brian Joan from Bergen County Technical High School in New Jersey. He's a rising senior and founder of the Asian American Youth Council. So thanks, Brian. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So thank you so much, Congressman, for answering so many questions from our community members. And now we have something really special we'd like to share with all of you. And it's a message from Congressman Kim's mom.
안녕하십니까. 저는
Thank you so much. And thank you. It was really great hearing from her. And so next, Kapac has done a lot of very important work throughout this pandemic. And I'd like to now hand it over to Kapac's Assistant Executive Director, Mina Kim, who will share some highlights of what Kapac has done.
May this coronavirus pandemic, members of Kapac have done many meaningful humanitarian activities. Blah, blah, blah. It's going to take like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, right?
Right.
That's the runner. Okay, I will just slow down a little bit.
Yeah, you gotta practice.
Okay.
Nina, I think you
want
need
me
to
practice?
spend 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
This
All
is
right.
really, yeah.
Okay, starting from beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning, because it's not just perfect with your word and the screen. So
Okay.
you need to practice a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, Mina Kim, who will share some highlights. Thank you, Mina.
Amid this coronavirus pandemic, members of Kapac have done many meaningful humanitarian activities. We have collected funds and donated N95 masks and PPEs. The generous donations are from members of Kapac as well as some community supporters of Kapac, whom agreed with our desire to assist the critical frontline responders at various hospitals and government agencies. We visited community-based medical facilities such as UCLA Medical Center, Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital in African American community, Korean American Community Hospital, homeless shelters in LA, and City of Winter Park Police Station and other nursing homes to donate PPE. Also, members in Seattle visited Harborview Hospital, and members in New York visited the Governor Cuomo's office to donate PPEs, also for frontline defenders.
Okay.
Through these campaigns, we were able to share what we have with those who are in desperate needs for safety. We also got many accolades and thank you letters, which expressed their gratitude and emotional tears as they relayed the message of how they were so passionately touched by our gesture of hospitality. These are remarkable public diplomatic activities Kapac has done during the time of pandemic. We also participated in Black Lives Matter protest with our community members, mainly Black and Hispanic community, to understand and address minority injustice in our daily lives as Americans. Currently, we are in the middle of another important humanitarian campaign, support COVID-19 response in North Korea. We have collected funds from members and supporters of Kapac. Our public relations director is contacting humanitarian aid organizations like UNICEF, which can deliver it directly to North Korea for medical aid. These actions should be, again, very influential and meaningful and humanitarian works of Kapac in this very challenging time of pandemic. Kapac has also supported the Census 2020 promotion with the city and county as very important task for our community. Thank you, and please consider joining the activity of Kapac.
Thank you so much, Mina, for your words. And next we have Lee Jung-hwa, Public Relations Director of Kapac, who will provide a more detailed report on the campaign to provide funds to UNICEF for COVID support for North Korea. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, Attorney Lee Jung-hwa is very busy right now, so she's gonna join a little bit later. So I think she can make it very, very nicely. So
Okay.
don't worry about that. Yeah.
Sure. And I'd like to now recognize some other special guests and give a shout out to Dave Min, Cindy Rue, blah, blah, blah. Okay, if you haven't done so already, please, we encourage you to complete the 2020 census. Please look in the chat box for a link in both Korean and English. And next, I will pass it off to Che Daepyonim, who will recognize some of our distinguished guests and close out this evening.
Okay. Thank you so much for participating in today's event. I'm so grateful to see more than like several hundred people join the Zoom link and about several hundred YouTube link from Nail newspaper for this event. So I'm gonna just go by screen order. There are so many distinguished guests today. So happy, but please apologize. I apologize for just not recognizing all of the people participating today. It will take just 5 minutes, very shortly, but it would be much better for all of us to get mentioned, to get recognized for their participation. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we have just 12 minutes left from the start. 8분 전에 시작해요. 10분이 아니라 4:52.
알겠습니다. 맞춰보겠습니다.
Okay. Okay, Tammy. So why don't you?
Take a break?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a break.
Let's take a just 2-minute break.
I think we need to be back in 5 minutes.
Tammy, you read all the questions. Is there any problem or?
I'm just right now. I'm still fixing the questions a little bit,
Yeah.
so it is grammatically correct when I'm speaking.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I want it to sound good.
Okay. Hi, 오은영 고문님. Thank you for you're not giving up like forever royalty, patronage for the peace on Korean Peninsula. Thank you so much. 정승덕 회장님, thank you so much. I feel like you gotta be rewarded for like attendance, perfect attendance rewarding, like 개근상. 송영길 의원님, yeah, we already gave you host function. You can unmute. 은 위원장님, 송영길 의원님께 호스트 드렸어요?
예, 지금 본인이 다 언뮤트 하실 수 있으십니다. 아직 뮤트는 안 시켜놨습니다.
오케이. 송영길 의원님, 지금 광주 전당대회가 있을 텐데도 이렇게 정말 바쁘신 시간에 함께 해주셔서 감사하고요. 우리 김명균 회장님, 전한인 회장님, 개근상이시죠? 예. 예, 송 의원님 언뮤트 되셨습니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 송영길입니다. 지금 오늘 광주에 비가 많이 와서 오늘 전당대회가 취소됐어요.
지금 다 뮤트 안 돼 있습니다.
지금 모든 분들 잠깐 언뮤트 해드릴게요. 제가 10분 전부터 뮤트를 하고 호스트들만 언뮤트를 하겠습니다. 본인이 푸셔도 됩니다. 지금 오은영 고문님, 정순호 회장님 푸셔도 돼요. 성의원님과 뭐 다 같이 인사 나누세요. 우리 김기수 내일신문 부장님 감사하고요. 본인이 언뮤트 하실 수 있어요.
그 이용빈 의원 못 오는 거지?
안녕하세요, 송 위원장님.
네, 안녕하세요, 회장님. 네, 최 대표님 수고 많습니다, 최 대표님. 네,
네, 최 대표님. 네, 수고 많아요. 네, 다. 우리 앤디 김 확헌 빌어야죠.
최 대표님 수고 많으셨어요. 네 번째 오늘.
예.
네, 수고 많았어요.
오늘 이게 끝나면 좀 이렇게 아마 확 풀릴 것 같습니다.
그렇죠. 예.
국민으로 해?
그리고 저희가 또 좋은 소식도 많이 기다리고 있어요. 이따 광고 드리겠지만 저희 이정화 변호사님이라고 드리겠지만 저희가 북한 돕기 운동 다들 수고해 주셔서
네.
아마 한국도 지금 시작됐는데 저희 동포들이 한국 돈은 한 6,500만 원 정도 저희 K팩이 모았잖아요.
네.
또 그 전달도 아주 잘 유니세프에서 북한 코로나 돕기 위한 타겟을 설정해서 특정해서 받는 거를 저희가 여기 유니세프 지부에 전달시키기를 하기로 했어요.
네,
네.
그래서 그러면 아마 그건 큰 뉴스가 되고 우리 한국 국민들 또 한국의 정부도 아마 힘이 될 거고 미국도 뭐 행정부나 의회 차원에서도 일부러 VOA나 이런 데서 뉴스를 만들 거거든요. 코리안 아메리칸들이 유니세프에 북한 코비드-19 돕기 펀드를 레이즈해서 유니세프로 보냈다라는 걸 기사를 내면 그 휴메니테리안 인도주의적인 지원 자체는 누구라도 다 할 수 있다. 누구라도 해야 된다. 라는 걸 좀 보여주고 엊그저께 한국에서도 통일부에서 1,000만 불에 대한 그 승인을 했잖아요.
네.
아마 의미 있는 첫걸음이
네,
될
네.
수 있을 것 같아서 아마 좋은 소식이 좀 기다리고 있습니다.
네,
네.
수고 많으셨어요.
정말
네.
수고 많으셨습니다.
아니 그리고 정승도 회장님 다들 오은영 우리 고모님 다 어려우신데 김명균 우리 한인 회장님 다들 어려우신데 십시일반 다 이렇게 도와주셔서
네, 별 말씀.
정말 어려운 일이었어요. 북한 동포 돕기 운동이.
네.
그런데 저희가 한 6,500만 원 가까이 모였다는 거 저는 사실 속으로 만족을 못했는데 저는 한 100만 불 정도 모일 줄 알았거든요. 그런데 많은 분들이 기적이라고 하더라고요. 기적.
맞습니다.
쉽지 않은 일이었다.
그럼요. 그럼요.
이 와중에.
네. 우리 이정화 우리 변호사님 들어오셨네요.
Oh, it's empty and no person there. I wonder what the heck was that? Thought I saw a little monster.
your face.
Okay.
Hi, Professor Kim from DC.
I don't see.
김 교수님 안녕하세요.
You might be on a
Face.
different screen.
여기 곽태한 교수님도 들어와 계십니다. Okay, Congressman Andy Kim and his staff will be joining this Zoom link at about 4:52, and then just after that we'll start playing his video clips, and we'll start on time at 5. 박경재, 총영사님도 들어오셨네. 네, 오케이.
보였어? 이때요? 여기
우리 박경재 LA 총영사님도 들어오셨는데요. 오늘의 축사는 송영길 한국 국회 외통위원장님께서 일본 축사를 하시고요. 그리고 뉴욕의 장원삼 총영사님 대사님께서 축사하시고 또 요번에 워싱턴 DC에서 연방의원이 거의 확정되다시피 한 메릴린 스트릭랜드가 세 번째 축사를 하십니다. 또 이렇게 참관해서 참여하시는 외교부도 많으신 것 같고요. 우리 LA 총영사님, 또 워싱턴 DC 총영사님, 또 뉴욕도 UN 본부, 한국 본부에서도 많은 외교관들이 오늘 이렇게 참여하셔서 들으실 예정이라고. 그래서 오늘 우리 줌 링크로 안 들어오셔도 또 내일신문에서 유튜브 지금 생중계를 해서요. 주로 한국에 계신 분들이나 외교관들은 그쪽을 통해서 보실 확률이 크다고 보여집니다. 우리 한국에 이천아 우리 회계사님 들어오셨네요. 감사합니다.
네, 고맙습니다.
예, 우리 여기 노스리지에서 교환 교수로 계셨었는데요. 반갑습니다.
네네, 아이고, 초대해 주셔서 감사합니다.
송 위원장님.
안녕하세요.
대표님 소리가 너무 밖에 울리는 것 같습니다. 배경에.
네, 지금은 그 뮤트를 다 풀어드렸거든요.
네.
그래서 이제 자유롭게 두고요. 지금 이제 2분 후에 전부 다 뮤트가 되고 호스트 기능을 가지신 분들
현태가
뮤트가 될 겁니다.
현태.
그럼 지금부터 뮤트를 할게요.
저 혹시 메릴린님 오셨습니까?
이렇게 하는 거야. 처음으로 이제
박영길 위원장님 포함했습니다. 안녕하세요.
전 세계 연결해서는
네, 저희 뮤트 시작하겠습니다. 그러면은 뮤트 시작하게 되면은 본인께서 뮤트를 못 하시게 됩니다.
예, 안녕하세요.
네, 박경재 LA 총영사님 들어오셨습니다.
예, 안녕하십니까.
이게 좋은 세상에.
네, 이제 현재 호스트 기능 가지신 분들만 언뮤트 하실 수 있으십니다. 죄송합니다. 다시 한번 시작하겠습니다. 네, 지금 앤디킴 의원님 들어오셨습니다. 앤디킴 의원님도 코스트 들어오셔가지고 언뮤트 하시고 말씀하실 수 있습니다. 저 태미킴 씨.
Hi, Tammy.
안녕하세요. Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Hi, Congressman Andy Kim.
Hi, thank you for having me here. Great to see you, Casey.
Hi.
Hey, Tammy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, great to see you.
Supporting you all the way from Irvine, California.
Oh, that's very nice
Yeah.
of you. Thank you.
Yeah, from Buena Park, California. Supporting
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
I wish I could be out there with you all. I can't wait till next time I can come on out and visit you all. But in the meantime, I'm glad we can come together virtually. So thank you for helping gather us all together.
Yeah, for sure. So we're supporting you all the way from the West Coast out here. So
Actually, Andy was supposed to be here on March, but from that March, the COVID-19 struck like East Coast and starting to spread out to West. So nobody could not just move. They were just sad, but we just found out another way we can get together.
Yeah, and it's in some ways it allows us to be able to get people from all over the country together, which is silver lining to this all, is to be able to make it accessible in that type of way. But it's not a substitute for the in-person though, and I look forward to that at some point.
Yeah.
We are now going to play KADC short of Congressman Andy Kim.
I was in one of the hardest districts in the country. We won by the narrowest of margins. It took 9 days to declare a victory because it was so close. This race was the most expensive House race in New Jersey history. That is not something to be proud of. That is something that shows the fundamental problems of our system and why those of us here at the table are trying to take steps to reform campaign finance reform and gerrymandering. Get rid of the systematic blocks that are preventing our government from working for the people as it should be, as it was laid out in our founding documents. But what we know the reality is that you don't have good government until you have good people working in government. And we're constantly doing this because we know every day is a fight. And my fight continues. And while election day was nearer than it is the next election day, and it feels far too soon to have to jump back on this, but we know that this is how it works. And there's a reality of the situation, and as I was taught, you can have all the ideals you want, but you also understand fundamentally that you fight on the battlefield on which you're dropped. And this is the battlefield on which we're dropped.
Good afternoon and good morning for guests joining us from South Korea. My name is Ho Jung-eun, Chairman of Kapac Next Gen Subcommittee. Before we start, I would like to share a few things to better our participation to the event. All participants will be muted during the proceedings of the event. It is recommended to rename using your real name for the purpose of introduction towards the end of our program. Please use a speaker view setting up to ease your viewing of the symposium. Now allow me to introduce our MC for today, which is our final symposium of the series, Ms. Tammy Kim. Ms. Kim serves our community as a managing director of Korean American Center. Ms. Kim is also a candidate this year for election in Irvine City Council. More come after this same introduction in Korean, Ms. Tammy Kim, our Mistress of Ceremony. 안녕하세요. Kapac 차세대 위원장 은호정입니다. 시작에 앞서 몇 가지 공지사항을 말씀드리겠습니다. 본 프로그램은 참가 인원이 뮤트 상태에서 진행됩니다. 강의 질의응답 시간 후 참가자 소개 시간도 있으니 이름을 본인의 이름, 지역 등으로 표기해 주시면 진행에 도움이 될 것입니다. 마지막 줌을 보다 재미있게 관람하시기 위해 오른쪽에 있는 스피커 뷰를 사용하시기 바랍니다. 오늘의 사회자는 우리 커뮤니티와 Kapac을 위해 항상 수고를 많이 해주시는 현재 한미문화센터 다이렉터로 계시는 김태미 얼바인 시의원 후보님을 소개합니다. MC 김태미님을 환영합니다.
안녕하세요, 여러분. Hello, I would like to welcome you all here to the 4th session of Kapac's 2020 Korea Peace Forum series. Again, I'm Tammy Kim, and I'll be your moderator this evening for this very important and timely discussion with U.S. elections just around the corner. And as a second-generation Korean American myself, especially one who's running for office, I'm really excited to moderate this particular event with Congressman Andy Kim. I personally feel a responsibility and duty to understand this very complicated issue so that way I too can help advocate and provide a voice for peace on the Korean Peninsula. So let's take a moment now to silently salute the national flags. Thank you, everyone. Please allow me to introduce 최광철 대표님, Casey Choi, President of Kapac, who will provide our opening remarks.
Thank you so much for joining tonight. Even in this unprecedented time of pandemic, I'm so happy to see precious members of Kapac, leaders and next generations of Korean American community, and many distinguished guests from Korea and overseas. Even if this is not an in-person event, I can feel your strong passion and energy to achieve the peace on Korean Peninsula. I want to say special thanks to Chairman Young-gil Song, Chair of Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee of National Assembly of ROK, Ambassador Won-sam Jang, Consul General of Korea in New York and New Jersey, and Marilyn Strickland, soon to be member of Congress, for giving precious welcome remarks for all of us. Most of all, I want to express my deepest appreciation to the proud and honorable Congressman Andy Kim, the only Korean American member of Congress. With his strong leadership and dedication, even in his first term at the Capitol Hill, there have been meaningful progress on the peace and humanitarian issues on Korean Peninsula, such as official end of Korean War, Divided Family Reunion Act, Congressional Briefing Session on Kaesong Industrial Complex, and Adoptee Citizenship Act, etc. I'm sure he will be successful historic leader in the Congress, not only for the peace on Korean Peninsula, but for the peace and justice in America. Even though there are so many obstacles, adversities, and difficulties on peace process on Korean Peninsula, I believe that with the power of working all together and with the strong support and leadership from Congress like Andy Kim and Marilyn Strickland, we can achieve sustainable peace, security, and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. Please join this time with Congressman Andy Kim, and I hope this event will be very much informative and fruitful for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, 대표님, for your warm welcome. And I'd like to now introduce to you all Song Young-gil, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, who will share some opening or welcoming remarks. Thank you, Chairman Song.
Unmute, please. 송 의원님, 언뮤트 하셔야 됩니다. 언뮤트. 무음 소거 하셔야 돼요. 무음 소거.
Okay, 들립니다. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Song Young-gil. Thanks for your introduction. Now I am in Gwangju, southern area of Korean Peninsula. As you know, during last night, the torrential rains pouring rapidly and increased the flow of stream and overflow is so caused a big casualty. So now that our party convention in Gwangju is cancelled. So anyway, I'm very concerned that nowadays, the day by day, the climate change is, aftermath of the climate change is very severe and serious. We should work together to mitigate and prevent such kind of climate change influence. It is great pleasure to join our friends at Kapac for the 2020 Korean Peace Forum first session. I wanted to express my sincere gratitude to Representative Andy Kim for being with us today. And I would like to congratulate former Tacoma Mayor Marilyn Strickland for winning the primary election. It is imperative to have federal lawmakers representing the Korean community in the United States. It also proves the strength of the community of Koreans can unite and bring lawmakers representing us into the U.S. Capitol. Representative Andy Kim is important for the Korean community because its presence is symbolic for all Koreans. Its military committee and small business committee represent the interest of Korean small business owners in the U.S. as well as peace on Korean Peninsula. I frequently checking your Facebook, Andy Kim. Relation between the South and North Korea and the U.S. seem to have lost its ground. The mood of reconciliation between the two Koreas has turned into a standoff. North Korea and the U.S. have also held open the door to dialogue. Further, in the Korean peace process and the process totally improvement, North Korea U.S. must grow. We should work hard at the diplomatic level to narrow the gap in perception of the North Korea relation in the United States. In the idea of liaison office, the idea of some level of diplomatic recognition, some level of communication is a must. Imagine a Cold War if the US didn't talk to the Soviet Union, and we saw the consequence of the not talking to the People's Republic of China for a quarter century. The more dangerous the regime, the more dangerous the situation, the more we need that communication. Also, why not recognize that we could see a peace declaration? We can talk about the negotiation of the former peace treaty. These are things that we recognize what we see today. They would help reduce tension, and finally, they address the question of the denuclearization of Korean Peninsula. President Trump, for all his support, his open option here. Let's take advantage of this opportunity, and this is the moment to do so. Let's do so quickly if we can. We cannot lose this momentum. I believe Representative Andy Kim and the former Mayor Marilyn Strickland will keep the momentum going at the U.S. Congress. I wish you all the best in the upcoming election. Let's keep in touch and let's strengthen in the parliamentary diplomacy to cooperate on this issue closely. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you so much, Chairman Song, for your insightful and encouraging words. We have now another special guest with congratulatory remarks, the Consul General of the Republic of Korea in New Jersey and New York, Chung Won-kam. Thank you, Consul General. Please unmute yourself.
Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm very glad to join all of you today. 우리 소영길 위원장님, 박경재 조영사님 이렇게 비디오 컨퍼런스 통해서 만나게 돼서 반갑습니다. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the Korean American Public Action Committee for successfully organizing this year's Korea Peace Forum. I'm very pleased and also honored to take part in today's session. I'm also delighted to meet with Congressman Andy Kim through this video conference. He has been working around the clock, not only for his district and his country, but also for the Korea-US alliance and partnership, and I appreciate that. And I want to take this opportunity to thank President Kwang Chol and the Kapac members for their various efforts and contributions toward establishing permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula and further strengthening the Korea-US alliance. Today's topic is COVID-19, US election, and the perspectives of peace process on the Korean Peninsula. Each issue is both a matter of great importance and a challenge for our two countries, so please allow me to briefly touch upon these three issues. First, the ongoing global pandemic poses grave threats to humanity beyond the national borders and in every aspect of our lives. To overcome this unprecedented crisis, we need to put our heads together and join hands. In this regard, I'd like to quote from the address by President Moon Jae-in to the 73rd World Health Assembly held on May 18th. He said, quote, "In the face of crisis, humankind must choose solidarity and cooperation over the pursuit of individual interests. The world must unite under the banner of mutual trust and inclusiveness in the face of the deepening crisis, unquote. Currently, Korea is doing her part, sharing various data, experience, and know-how in coping with COVID-19 related matters. The country is also providing humanitarian assistance, including face masks and test kits to countries with vulnerable healthcare systems. Until the day everyone is free from COVID-19, we must work together and leave no one behind. Next, when it comes to the US election, all eyes are focused on how things will turn out this November because the outcome will be critical, not just for America's future, but also for the whole world. Right now, it is too early to predict the outcome, and it is anybody's guess. But I'm sure that everyone shares the same hope that the next US president, whoever it may be, will be a leader who will inspire renewed hope for the world. And last, but certainly not least, is an issue of permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula, because it will have a huge impact on not only the peninsula, but also the region and beyond. As all of you know, two Koreas are still technically at war, and the threat of war still persists even today. For this reason, the successive Korean governments have tried to bring about denuclearization and permanent peace on the peninsula, but their attempts have made little progress. Even under the current Moon Jae-in administration, the inter-Korean relations seem to be on a wild roller coaster ride. After an initial honeymoon period marked by a series of bilateral summits among two Koreas and the United States, we have recently witnessed North Korea blowing up the inter-Korean liaison office. Despite our frustration, however, we cannot give up. Our future and that of our descendants are at stake. Therefore, the Korean government, backed by a strong defense posture, will continue to pursue this peace policy in a consistent manner on the basis of three principles. I mean, first, the zero tolerance for war. Second, mutual security guarantee. And third, co-prosperity on the peninsula. And we will continue such efforts in close cooperation with our great ally and partner, the United States. Korea will also endeavor to upgrade our bilateral alliance to a future-oriented, comprehensive strategic alliance of shared values. Well, that's all I wanted to say today, and I look forward to hearing insightful and informative views and opinions on the three topics from today's keynote speaker, the Congressman Andy Kim, and I do wish him all the very best in the upcoming election this November. Thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you all stay safe and well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Consul General Chung, for your very powerful message. We now have another guest who will share congratulatory remarks. As was mentioned, she just successfully made it through the primary election in the state of Washington, District 10. And I'm so very pleased to introduce a candidate for the United States House of Representatives, and hopefully our future Congresswoman, Marilyn Strickland. Thank you, Marilyn.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. It is an honor to be here today, and thank you to the Korean American Public Action Committee to host this event and to invite me. As we think about what's happening right now, both in the US and around the world, leadership is what's incredibly important. And last Tuesday night, out of a field of 18 people, I finished first in the primary election. And it was a lot of hard work. It was a great opportunity, but it also means that we now have an opportunity to have representation at the US House of Representatives. So Congressman Andy Kim is not sitting there by himself. And I want to thank everyone on this call today who reached out to me, who sent me a text message, who sent me a call, who called me on Tuesday night. And it just means a lot to me to hear from our community and my community. With that said, as I think about what's in front of us with the idea of having peace, It's interesting when we think about the idea of peace, because this is about prosperity and opportunity for people around the world. And people who typically want peace and prosperity have it themselves at home. So when you have nations that don't feel that themselves, it's hard for them to want it for other people. And what we have to do as a nation in the United States is move beyond the belief that only populations that have European people are entitled to peace and prosperity. It should be entitled to everyone around the world. Now, when I think about the opportunity of what's happening right now, especially during this election cycle, this is the most important election of our lifetime. We're going to set the tone for national leadership here in the United States, but also global security. It means a lot to a lot of people. But as a member of the Korean American community, we also know that here at home in the US, we have to make sure that people's basic needs are met. And the things that are important to our community must be met. And that includes access to affordable housing. It means economic opportunity. It means support for small businesses. It means access to affordable healthcare. And it also means that we have to understand the role that the US plays in the world and the expectation that we are supposed to be leaders. When I think about the opportunity for peace on the Korean Peninsula, for some people, it seems like something that will never happen because of the way that the news media portrays what happens on the peninsula between the North and the South. One of the biggest challenges with COVID right now is that travel is restricted. Air travel is restricted. So as I think about the opportunity to serve with Congressman Kim, we know that part of what we have to do is help educate our colleagues in Congress and people in our communities about the history of Korea, about the history of why it is two countries today, the role of the West in that happening, and what we can do to educate people so that they can understand that the reunification and peace on the peninsula is not just good for Korea, it's good for peace on the Pacific. It's good for the US. And so as I think about the opportunity to be part of this group, to possibly go to Congress as the first Korean American woman to serve in Congress's 235-year history, I know that it is a big responsibility. But as a Korean American woman, we have large shoulders. We are used to having big responsibility. So I am very proud to be part of this community. I cannot get elected without the support of my community, and not just here at home in Washington State, but around the entire country. So thank you for letting me be here today. It is an honor to be among you. And I'm very, very excited about the opportunity to serve in Congress. And I'm also very, very interested in hearing what Congressman Andy Kim has to say. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much to our future Congresswoman, Marilyn Strickland. So let's take a moment to enjoy a retrospect of some Kapac highlights with precious memories from tonight's special guest, the Honorable Congressman Andy Kim. much for a look back with Congressman Kim. I'd like to now introduce to you the 이사장님, Kim Dong-soo, Board Chairman of Kapac, Dr. Chris Kim, who will introduce this evening's special guest.
I'm honored and privileged to introduce our Congressman Andy Park, who ran the Congress, New Georgia District 3, with the endorsement of President Barack Obama at the time. And now Barack Obama endorsed him for this election 2020 with current Democratic President candidate Joe Biden. What a proud man and what a good role model for all Korean American, especially for a young generation. I believe that about 50 to 80 young Korean American participating on this forum, and he is a really good role model for all of them and for all of us. He studied, graduated at Chicago College, and then he got Rose Scholarship and went to the Oxford and got a master's degree and PhD degree in England. He came back and working as an expert for Middle East. He worked in Afghanistan and Middle East for during the war. So he's working 3 committees. One of the committees is armed force and small business. Recently, he was appointed as only young freshman congressman for the House Select Committee for coronavirus crisis. What a proud. As he's himself very proud of this committee member, I check he's working last few days. He donated so many masks and PPEs to many communities. As you saw, the Kapac did for all the communities throughout the country. I'm very, very proud to introduce our congressman and their team.
이사장님, 죄송합니다. I think we lost your microphone.
You cannot hear me? So,
why don't we just continue on with Congressman Andy Kim? Why don't you take it away? Thank you very much, Congressman.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for having me on here. Thank you, Casey and Tammy, for helping put this together and for all the speakers so far. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity. I've been looking forward to just be able to share with you some of what I've been working on and some of my thoughts about next steps. But the bigger issue here really is just what it is that brings us all together and what is binding us here together today, which is our shared commitment that we need to stay engaged, that we need to have a voice in the room, a seat at the table. We need to have our perspective taken into account, and we cannot assume that that's just going to happen unless we fight for it. And in terms of this forum that has been happening for weeks, it's about engaging leaders from around this country to make sure that they understand our perspective, to make sure that they hear what it is that we want to be said about the issues that we care deeply about. And I'll certainly tell you that I've seen this firsthand, the importance of this, being the only Korean American in Congress. And the other thing I'll say is that after only a year and a half, I really, I'm tired of being the only Korean American in Congress, and I'm looking forward to having some reinforcements to help me out in just a couple months. So it was awesome to be able to see Maryland pull off such an extraordinary primary victory just a couple days ago. And I was staying up late on the East Coast, just trying to see the numbers come through. I told my kids about it the next day, how, you know, I'm really excited to have, hopefully, this all work out and have an incredible colleague in Maryland, someone who is been an extraordinary voice for her community, but someone who just brings to bear just a level of expertise and experience that I certainly know is much needed in Congress. Not only can she help me raise our voices up collectively, but we're going to be able to learn a lot from each other, and hopefully have a chance to be able to serve alongside each other for a long time to come. So I just wanted to start this off by just very clearly and confidently saying that I need Marilyn working with me in Congress, and I hope all of you support her. I hope all of you pay attention to her incredible leadership, and you work with me to get her elected. With that, I wanted to just talk about what it is that we can do together, all of us, to be able to accomplish what we need. As Marilyn said, we are undoubtedly facing the most important election of our lifetimes. We live in historic times right now, whether we like it or not. And now the question before all of us is, what are we going to do about that? Now, part of that is about the upcoming election. Part of that is also about what we are doing each and every day. But there's also another element to it, which is, what do we want to see happen over the longer term? What kind of effort do we want to see being done? And I'd like to talk through the multitude of different issues that we're supposed to talk to, but talk about them as a collective here, because I truly believe that there is a thread that cuts across our elections, our nation's response to the coronavirus crisis, as well as what the future of the U.S. relationship is to the Korean Peninsula, to South Korea, and next steps on that front. For me, as mentioned, I serve on the Select Committee on the coronavirus crisis, and I feel honored to try to do whatever I can to be able to help get our country on a better path when it comes to this. This is something where I honestly admit I was surprised to be named to this committee as a first-term member of Congress. What role do I play in the committee that has such importance and such jurisdiction on the most pressing crisis of our time? But when I asked why I was being appointed to this, why I was being asked to serve, leadership reminded me that I had served in national security before. I had worked on national security crises over the course of my career, and I served at the White House as a coordinator for a counterterrorism operation and a broader global war. So I've seen firsthand what it takes for us to be able to have a whole of government strategy to be able to address the crises that we face. While those crises I dealt with are different than a pandemic, what we know is that our tools are very much similar in terms of what it is that we can do to leverage the best of our nation, the most experience that we have, the expertise that we have to be able to accomplish this. And that is what I'm trying to do when it comes to my work on this committee every single day, whether it's from the hearing that we had yesterday about how do we educate our children in a safe and responsible way, which is something I think about personally as a father of two little boys whose screaming you might hear in the background as I talk, as they are clearly not going to bed at the time that I told them to, but also to our considerations about healthcare, national security, etc. What we need to make sure that we have is a government that is focused on building a strategy to be able to get us through this time. And that's something that I think hits at a lot of the threads that we're talking about today. What we need to do is be able to understand what are our challenges today, the near-term challenges that we're facing, like small businesses that are struggling to understand how they're going to keep paying their bills, how they're going to be able to keep afloat when they've taken such big hits in terms of their revenue, in terms of their customers. This is something that we see across the board, and in particular, minority-owned businesses, talking to Korean American-owned businesses, Asian American-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses, Hispanic-owned businesses. A lot of our minority-owned businesses, immigrant-owned businesses are the ones that are struggling the most. They're the ones that have the least access to capital, the least assistance in different ways. And we need to do better to make sure that there's fairness here, that we're doing everything we can to be able to support them through the toughest times that small businesses have ever struggled through. When it comes to our public health disparities, when it comes to this coronavirus crisis and broader health issues, we see it across the board. I've heard and seen with my own eyes that Korean American communities in New Jersey or Asian American communities around this country oftentimes were some of the ones that struggled the most to be able to get information about the coronavirus early on, whether it was due to language barriers or just communication coming from the government that isn't tuned or isn't plugged in with our communities and how to be able to convey critically important information, whether that's about a shutdown, whether that's about help that people can get. And we see it right now with testing and continued testing struggles that we see across the board, or whether it's about issues like contact tracing, which still to this day across all 50 states and territories on top of that, still isn't having the type of investment into making sure that contact tracing can happen with nuance about what languages people might be speaking, and be able to convey that information across the board to be able to ensure that people are being talked about in that way. So, those are some of the issues that I've seen firsthand about the struggles. And on top of that, we also see the important role that, essential workers play, and how so many of our hospital workers, how many people in our healthcare system and elsewhere are Asian Americans, are Korean Americans, whether that's doctors, nurses, about essential workers who work at grocery stores or other small businesses that kept our country afloat. We need to make sure that we're looking out for them. There's a lot that we have to deal with going forward as well, beyond just the near-term issues. And that's about issues like the vaccine. What happens next with the production, the development, the production, and ultimately the distribution of the vaccine around our country. Fundamental questions that we still don't have answers to, like how is our country going to determine who gets the vaccine first? How do we know that the vaccine will be safe and reliable? How do we know that politics aren't going to play a role in terms of that production and give the American people peace of mind that our country is working for them at a time when we have such deep divisions at all levels of government? These are the types of issues I'm hearing about in my district. I'm sure Maryland is hearing about them in her district. All of us want to understand this, because ultimately it comes down to our issues of our family, of our community, and what it is that we want to see government doing. We want a government that helps us live our best lives. We want a government that we know is looking out for all of us equally, with a fairness and a justice that we all deserve. And that is what we need to do when it comes to this crisis, now more than ever. I always learned coming up in national security that the last place that partisan politics belongs is in our national security. When we're facing as a country crises that affect life and death, that is not a situation in which you want people to be making decisions based off of politics or polling or elections. We demand of our public officials, and you should demand of me, and my district demands of me, to be better than that, to make sure that we can try to pull our country together, not talk about what pushes us further apart, but rather what bridges us together. And a situation like we face right now with this crisis, this is an example of a crisis that presents us also with an opportunity to come together, to try to make sure that we understand that this is a virus that threatens us, but knows no racial color, skin color, knows no faith or state boundaries or country boundaries. This is a virus that cuts to the core of who we are as humans. And as a result, we should use that as an opportunity for us to reflect upon what is the core of us as humans, and find that as a common ground on which to rebuild and be able to, in a more unified way, fight back together against an enemy that faces all of us collectively. So those are some of the opportunities that I hope we come together on. And it hits at this broader issue that we deal with when we're looking at foreign policy, when we're looking at what we should be thinking about in terms of the next steps of our relationship with South Korea, our next actions on the Korean Peninsula, and also, what we want to see happen in November. As I said, we talk about some of these near-term challenges that we face, whether it's about the crisis or with the coronavirus. We also experience this in a near-term way with the U.S. relationship with South Korea that we've seen, in my opinion, pushed aside in ways that have frustrated me. It was about our defense strategic partnership in terms of the alliances that we know are so fundamental to our relationship, and in my opinion, a diminishing understanding of the importance of the Korean, of the strategic alliance between the United States and South Korea. That this isn't just about the protection of South Korea, but it's also fundamental to the United States' strategic priorities when it comes to what happens next with our relationship with China, or what happens next with our relationship and actions with North Korea. Security in the Pacific and around this globe very much hinges upon our relationship with South Korea. And I think that that's something that is so often overlooked by the current discussions that are out there. And that brings me to sort of that final frame. While we think about the challenges that we face on a near-term level, the day-to-days that we are struggling through right now as we face multiple crises across the board, what we have to keep in mind is the longer horizon about where we're trying to go to. What we know is that the world that we are now opening back into is fundamentally a different world than the world we socially distanced from back in March and April. And that what has happened over the last few months has fundamentally altered the landscape globally, that we now need to understand what those implications are. And we need to have a government, we need to have leaders in Congress like Marilyn, like myself, who are thinking about how to be able to position America in the strongest way to be able to not just participate in this post-coronavirus world that we'll be emerging into, but to continue to be a leader in that type of world. And I worry about whether or not we are positioned to be able to do that on a lot of different fronts. One thing that I have come to understand as paramount to our ability to be global leaders is about building coalitions, is about our ability to work together, to be able to come together with other like-minded countries like South Korea, to be able to accomplish things that are very much in our shared interest. The coronavirus crisis is a perfect example of that. This is an opportunity for the United States to play a global leadership role, whether it comes to with the vaccine development and other efforts, but we unfortunately continue to see this type of America first mentality, which ultimately really means America only. It has left us more isolated. It has left us more vulnerable to the different challenges that we face across the board. And that is something that we need to fundamentally revisit as we think about what happens next. I do believe that the world that we'll be opening up into will be a very challenging place to be in. It will be one that pushes the limits of our economy. It is one that continues to present transnational threats like climate change and other problems like that we cannot ignore, nor can we put on the back burner. But it is also highlighting and accentuating these divisions in terms of how countries are understanding their place out there. And there is this dangerous thread of nationalism, of hatred and partisanship in every corner of this world, trying to otherize each other, trying to find ways to pit us up against each other and create a dangerous zero-sum mentality that limits the ability for us to imagine cooperation across the board. So these are some of the things that I hope all of us can work together to be able to address, commit to being able to do. We see it within our own community, for instance, where we have seen a tremendous amount of anti-Asian American discrimination and bias just over the last few months when it's come to the response to this coronavirus crisis. I felt it firsthand myself. There were a number of different experiences that I had where I sat down, for instance, next to a woman on a train, and as soon as she turned over and saw that of Asian descent, she started yelling at me, screaming at me, punching my shoulder, yelling obscenities and racist slurs at me until I moved seats away from her. You know, those are some of the very real and tangible challenges that we still face today. I refuse to allow that I refuse to believe that my children have to grow up in a world like that. And I want to do everything I can to be able to fight for their future. And a lot of that starts with this coming November. There's a lot at stake with this election. And I'm not going to get into all the politics of it right now. That is not what this discussion is about. But I just really hope that all of us can work together across the board to understand that now is a time for us to take a stand, for us to work together and fulfill what all of us on this call want to do, which is make sure that our Korean American community is out there, that people are getting informed and educated about what is happening, that all of us understand that our voice, whether at the ballot box or in Congress or at the White House, is as valid and as important as anyone else's voice in this entire country. The Korean American community, I truly believe, can be a vibrant and dynamic leadership voice within our country. And it's up to us to be able to determine that. A lot of people on this call right now are some of the leading voices in our communities across this nation. And I am excited about this opportunity. I think having me and Marilyn in Congress together could very well be that platform and that foundation on which we can just continue to build that type of advocacy and engagement that can take this to the next level and to be able to build on this going forward. I want to say and end on that type of note here, that while we face this challenge of the coronavirus, the economic hardship, the movement for racial justice and addressing systemic racism in our nation, the global challenges that we face, let us not be just motivated by the things that we are fearful of and scared of, the things that we are fighting against. We as a community, as a people, as a family, in every different way, we need to understand what we stand for and what we're fighting for. And that's what this election needs to be about. I, for one, believe that if we make these right decisions, if we take the steps that we need to this November going forward, elect great leaders like Maryland and others to be able to help get our country in a better path, I believe that the next Congress, the 117th Congress, could very well be one of the most, if not the most, dynamic and productive Congresses in modern history. I truly believe that that could be the Congress that engages in the kind of debate that we need, that helps shape the kind of foreign policy and vision for the future that can strengthen our relationship and partnership with South Korea, take the tough decisions and bring together the right experts to figure out what next with North Korea or what the future of our relationship will be with China. A lot of these issues that we have been just kicking the can down the road. We cannot kick the can down the road anymore. And the coronavirus crisis era that we live in demands for us to finally pick up the pieces and do what's right. I don't want to just pass on these challenges to my children and to their generation. Now is the time for us to work together to be able to fight for a more peaceful and just and equal world. And I think that starts by making sure we fight for that here at home and that we fight for that within our own community. So with that, I just wanted to turn it on back. We can have a great discussion with some good questions, but I hope this has been helpful for you to understand some of the priorities that I've been seeing in Congress, some of the work that I've been trying to get done, and why it is that we cannot relent and we cannot give up, and why it is we need to continue to build to be able to get folks like Maryland into Congress. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for all the work that you've done on behalf of the Korean American community in advocating for policy priorities that affect us not only here in the country, but also abroad. I also want to personally acknowledge that you know, you're the only Korean American in Congress, and you've been carrying the entire weight of the diaspora on your shoulders. And for that, I personally want to thank you. So with that, we've received some really great questions throughout the United States and from Korea. So if you wouldn't mind, let's begin with our Q&A. So I'd like to start off with a question from Andrew Park, 변호사 from New York. And he asks this. Unfortunately, there are widely held misperceptions that President Trump and the Republican Party have been more actively engaged in peace talks with North Korea in comparison to the Obama administration and the Democratic Party's strategic patience policy towards North Korea. So if Vice President Joe Biden is elected, would he be willing, ready, and able to engage in the peace process in the Korean Peninsula, including direct talks with Kim Jong-un? Also, would he support the idea of either an official end to the Korean War or peace treaty or a peace declaration? Congressman Kim.
Yeah, happy to. Actually, can we take another question as well? And I'll do two at a time. That way we can try to get through more. I'd love to.
Sure. Well, if you can answer this, because the next question is sort of a two-part question.
Okay, sure thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'll try to get through it. I just want to make sure we try to have as much dialogue as we can. You know, this question gets at a really key issue here, and I think it gets at some of what I was trying to convey in my remarks, which is, you know, what is the strategy? You know, what is it that our country is actually trying to achieve when it comes to our relationship with South Korea, with the Korean Peninsula? And I think that is something that still remains in a void. And I'll be honest, I don't think, you know, looking back on past administrations, I don't think Democrats or Republicans have been particularly good at addressing that issue. And I think, again, that's why it's so important to have us have a voice in the room and a seat at that table. And I've certainly been trying to do everything I can over the last year and a half that I've been in Congress to try to press on this and really try to get the White House, our leadership on both sides of the aisle, to articulate what are we trying to achieve? What is it that we're trying to do when it comes to our relationship with the Korean Peninsula? And it can't just be echoes of the Korean War or just side projects in our effort to engage with China. South Korea is not just a pawn on the table. It is a strategic partnership, and it's something that has objectives and goals in and of itself, not just because of its proximity to North Korea or to China. So that is something that clearly needs to be articulated. This current president, in my opinion, is failing to do so. I think he very much saw the issues of the Korean Peninsula as more of a political theater and a stage on which to perform and photo ops for him to try to showcase what he believes global leadership actually means. But he has fallen far short when you see how he has treated South Korea, how he's diminished that strategic alliance on so many different fronts. And that's something that I hope that we are able to address going forward. I know that I've had the chance to be able to work with Vice President Biden before. I worked at the White House with him. I've seen how he engages. And first of all, what I'll say is he has extraordinary experience when it comes to foreign policy. He is one of the most knowledgeable elected officials in terms of just the sheer understanding and nuance that they have and expertise that they have when it comes to foreign affairs. And I know that he will bring that to bear. He will have an extraordinary team around him of experts that understand these issues deeply. And I do believe that he will be willing to take the strong steps necessary if the right situations present itself. I do not want to put words in his mouth about, you know, exactly how far he'll be willing to engage and whether or not direct talks or other aspects are on the table. I would imagine, given what I've seen from him, that he will do everything he thinks is needed for us to be able to get the kind of effort we would have. I would imagine that if an opportunity presents itself for greater peace on the Korean Peninsula and for progress going forward, real tangible progress, and not just just some imagined accomplishment, I think he would be willing to take very strong and bold steps to be able to get this strategic relationship and our country's efforts in the region on a stronger path. And I say that by having seen him take very bold initiatives and been willing to have that type of courage going forward. So on that front, I do believe that our policies to the Korean Peninsula and our relationship to South Korea will be significantly better under a Biden presidency. But like I said, I take nothing for granted. I'm not going to assume that anybody in this country is going to just follow through on their own. It requires us all to continue to work together to make sure that these ideas and these good policies are moving forward. That's why I've tried to push forward in Congress and work with my colleagues to move forward, like trying to have that declaration for the end of the Korean War and other steps like that. These are things that I'm trying to do to be able to move that needle forward. And no matter who is president that's next, I will do everything that I can in Congress to be able to move that push forward. And I will not rest or sit on my laurels and just assume that that will happen. I will fight every single day to bring about the kind of change that we need.
Excellent. So we do have a two-part question from Kim Gi-soo 기자 from 내일신문, a newspaper in Korea. So 기자님 writes, or the two-part question is, first, under the Obama administration, the nuclear agreement with Iran was that of phasing out economic sanctions step by step in exchange for them to freeze their nuclear program. So if Biden were elected as president, how much do you think that the Iranian nuclear agreement model will be adopted in resolving the North Korean nuclear issue? And then secondly, do you think just before the presidential election, there'll be the possibility of a US-North Korea summit? And if that does happen, what levels of agreement can we expect?
Well, I'll start with the second one first. And I don't mean to be a downer here, but I don't see the prospects of talks between the United States and North Korea prior to election day. And if they were to happen, I wouldn't expect them to be very substantive and lead to real agreement at this point. Again, I've been working very hard and diligently pressing the State Department for understanding what they are trying to achieve next when it comes to North Korea. It has been very much deprioritized in this administration, since the discussions in Singapore and Hanoi. This is not something that they are moving forward on with the level of attention that I think it deserves. So that's what I'll just kind of start on that front. With the first part of the question, I'm a former diplomat. I've worked on a lot of different issues before. And one thing I'll say is that there's no cookie cutter approach to trying to address some of these big issues, especially when they come to the possibility of nuclear weapons and nuclear war. There may be some reflections of what happened with Iran that might be helpful to use thinking forward, but it is not something that can be transferred over. A couple of things that I think stand out, though, is that with the agreement with Iran, one part of that made it particularly strong was by having a multilateral effort rather than a just unilateral or bilateral effort. The fact that we had many other powerful nations from around the world engaged in that process to be able to show that this is a more unified and critically important approach. I thought that was a resoundingly powerful experience. Obviously, it complicates and makes things much more difficult to be able to achieve agreement and consensus, but ultimately it made for agreement to be stronger and more representative of where things are at. The issues that we face on the Korean Peninsula, they're not just about the U.S. relationship with the Korean Peninsula or South Korea or North Korea. They are global issues. And this is something that I do believe stands a better chance to be able to have additional voices at the table to try to make sure that we are addressing these issues more comprehensively and across the board. I also want to make sure that South Korea has the voice that it needs to have. I was a little frustrated with how information was being conveyed from the Trump administration. I didn't feel like there was enough transparency. I didn't feel like there was enough consultation often with our partners in South Korea about what was going on. I think that was most clear in the second summit, when there was just a very little understanding about what President Trump was even willing to discuss and ultimately agree upon. A summit is not something you just put together. It is not just something you throw together very quickly. I think General Mattis, or Secretary Mattis, former Defense Secretary, said it best once when I heard him say, a summit is the top of a mountain, and it requires a mountain of work to be able to get two countries or multiple countries together to be able to achieve that. And it is so important that we put in the hard work to be able to get there. That hard work is not being done right now, but I'm hoping that that's something that we get to work on with the new administration.
Excellent. And we have another two-part question from physician Dr. Chris Kim, 이사장님 from Riverside. And he wants to know that, first of all, even though President Trump met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un 3 times over the last 2 years, neither nation was able to achieve anything. Now, most polls show Joe Biden leading. So what kind of actions do you recommend that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party take in order to achieve real and practical negotiations for peace on the Korean Peninsula? And then secondly, as a Korean congressional representative yourself, do you have any special agenda to promote peace, the peace process on the Korean Peninsula? And will work with other Korean American communities and organizations such as Kapac? Yeah, okay. So super easy question about what is the best way forward to have peace on the Korean Peninsula. It's so let me start with the second one. I mean, look, being the only Korean American in Congress, it definitely puts upon me a lot to try to make sure that I'm being representative across the board on so many different issues and take that into account. I've had the opportunity to travel around the country and engage with different Korean American communities and hear from them about some of the different perspectives that they bring to bear. And that's helped inform me about, where I want to put my time and energy when it comes to issues related to the Korean American community and to to the U.S. relationship with Korea. So those are things that I hope to be able to continue to push. When it comes to my agenda, I just want to try to be helpful in whatever way I can. I do come to this job with a deep amount of humility. I'm not saying that I have all the answers in terms of how this moves forward. But what I do know is that we have a lot of incredible experts and communities whose voices need to be heard, and I really do hope that the next president puts a lot of effort into engaging with our community, listening to us first, understanding who are people that can represent our voice and our efforts going forward. And I think it starts from that. I think too often we've seen just the agendas about what happens with our relation to South Korea happen, just kind of these decisions are made behind closed doors, doesn't give the Korean American community inputs. I felt the same way actually about some of the talks with North Korea over the last year or 2 years, is that I don't feel like that our community was consulted in the way that they should be. And I see how with other issues of foreign policy around the world, other diaspora communities in our country are very much brought into the fold. Their issues and their perspectives are considered. We don't have that same type of treatment. And I think that's in part because we need to do better at having our voices heard
I'll do my best to be able to raise that up, and I hope Marilyn gets elected in, and she can be someone that can help me raise that voice up. But it's going to take a lot of concerted effort. In organizations like the ones that we have on this call today, your voices are really important. It's important that we show and build that coalition, and not just put the burden or not just put the efforts onto the backs of me and other Asian American members of Congress or leaders. Like, we need to make sure that all members of Congress across this country understand the importance of our relationship to South Korea and why it would be in our strategic advantage and objective to have peace on the Korean Peninsula. That, again, just needs to be baked into our broader efforts, and I hope that we are able to accomplish that together.
Excellent. And our next question is from Lee Jong-un, Senior Advisor of the Dosan Anchang Ho Memorial Committee in Riverside. And he wants to know, like so many so-called neocon or neoconservatives here in the United States, there's political forces of the far right in South Korea who are actually opposed to the inter-Korean dialogue and cooperation, and they support maintaining a Cold War regime and even preemptive war provocations. So what is your attitude if they try to look for support with you, Congressman?
Well, look, one thing that I make very clear is that my job is to be able to represent my district and to be able to represent the United States. I don't take a role in terms of taking sides in terms of the politics in Korea. As I said, I'm willing to listen and to debate and to engage, but I certainly want to make sure that we don't just try to move our global dynamics back to the Cold War. We need to be pushing forward and trying to think of new ways to be able to have cooperative efforts to be able to push for greater peace. And people that are trying to get in the way of those types of progress and that type of peaceful agenda are probably folks that I'll continue to have deep disagreements on in terms of where we go from here. So, for me, I continue to look forward to strengthen my relationship with officials in Korea, and I've tried to take it upon myself to meet with a wide range of folks and willing to listen in. But when it comes to what actually happens next and the policies that the United States will engage in and what we will try to promote there on the Korean Peninsula, I think you all know where I stand on that. It's the issues that I've talked about today, and that's what I'll continue to push for.
Excellent. The next question is from Jung Yoon-seok, U.S. correspondent of Yonhap News, who states that from January this year in a Wall Street op-ed, you mentioned the importance of the U.S.-Korea alliance, saying that two nations can better promote progress with North Korea and serve as a check on China's influence, which he completely supports. And so the question is, despite the perception of the United States, North Korea actually does not have strong trust and confidence in China. Is there any possibility, do you think, that that North Korea can be a U.S. ally like Vietnam, who fought with the U.S. but has now become one of the strongest economic and military allies of the United States?
That's a good question. I mean, I think for me, there's just too many variables here to even say, what is possible. I mean, I think that is so far off from where we're at now. I mean, I always try to come into foreign policy with some optimism. And I say that having worked on issues of Iraq and Afghanistan over my career, I've worked in some of the toughest challenges that were out there. But, I always hope that we can, be able to move things in a better direction. But like I said, we're far away off from that right now. And when we're dealing with just the deep strategic concerns like nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, I don't want to minimize that threat and minimize, how far we have to go before we get to what we said. I'm sure that when, the United States was at war in Vietnam, I'm sure people didn't think that that several decades later we'd have the kind of relationship and partnership that we have with Vietnam. And I was able to go visit that country a couple years ago. So, there's always, hope and possibility. But that doesn't just come about just by luck. It doesn't just come about by happenstance. It requires a lot of hard work. And again, I'll return to that word that I've used many times tonight, which is strategy, to be able to execute something like that. And I hope that our country can muster that type of strategic effort. But right now, we still have a lot of hard work to do ahead of us.
No, absolutely correct. So we now have a few questions from some of our youngest Korean Americans here around the country. We've got a question from Kristen Choi, a 10th grader from Palisades Park High School in New Jersey, who wants to know, how will the government deal with the increasing number of people losing their jobs and homes because of this pandemic?
Yeah, this is this is something we're trying to deal with on with the work that I did today. For instance, I mean, we're deep in negotiations right now in Congress about how we try to help the American people going forward, about unemployment insurance, about trying to prevent people from getting evicted from their homes during these tough times, trying to get businesses back open and in a safe and responsible way. Those are really important. One thing I'll say though on this front is that no matter how much support we put into unemployment insurance or support to small businesses or other things like that, our economic challenges that we face right now will not go away and will not be able to be meaningfully addressed until we are actually able to turn the corner in terms of our response to the public health crisis that we face. We as a nation are continuing to struggle deeply when it comes to a strong and holistic response to this virus. We are still not having the type and level of testing that we need. People in my district, when they get tested, they often have to wait anywhere from 5 to 10 days, sometimes even more, for results to get back. We're just not doing what we need to do to be able to address this virus. And as a result, we're going to continue to have economic problems going forward because we are not able to address the core problem that is causing so much of the economic hardship and upheaval right now. So I really continue to call on our nation to take the steps that we need to so that we can try to get a handle on this virus as quickly as possible and have the best chance that we can to get people back to work, to be able to save businesses that are struggling right now, to be able to get students the kind of education that they need and deserve. That is my hope, and that's what I'm trying to do every day on this select committee on the coronavirus crisis.
Excellent. Our next question comes from an 11th grader, Andrew Shin, from Fort Lee Academies in Inglewood, New Jersey. And he wants to know, so as of now, there is a racial profiling hate on Asians, including Koreans that live in the United States because of the coronavirus. What do you think the solution can be for that situation?
This is about the anti-Asian American discrimination bias.
Yeah, basically the anti-Asian, due to coronavirus.
Yeah. So this is a great question. First of all, great to always have someone from New Jersey ask a question. I'm always going to be a little partial on that front. So thanks so much for asking. But look, as I said in my remarks, this is something that I've experienced firsthand. My parents have experienced this. It's deeply worrisome. And in New Jersey, we've had a lot of issues, even within our own state, whether businesses or restaurants owned by Asian Americans and others that have been targeted with, racial discrimination and slurs and graffiti. A couple things here. One is that I've been trying to engage with local law enforcement and federal law enforcement, including the FBI, to be able to heighten sensitivity for their officers and for others to understand these issues. For us to also have national coordination when it comes to the reporting of anti-Asian American discrimination, bias, hate crimes, other types of incidents like that. So we understand what is happening across the board. If we are only looking at this in isolated standpoints, we might not see broader trends that are out there that can give us a sense of just how deep and what the sheer magnitude is of these problems going forward. So we need to have that coordination across the board for us to be able to do that. And the other thing that I'll say is that it's important that we have, again, a broad coalition to show that these issues, while they affect the Asian American community, there's a lot of issues that we face right now about racial discrimination and systemic racism. One of the more powerful experiences that I had was back, I think it was in March or April, we had the Asian American caucus alongside in Congress, alongside the Congressional Black Caucus and the Hispanic Caucus coming together to condemn the anti-Asian American discrimination that's out there, saying that discrimination against our Asian brothers and sisters should not be tolerated by our Black brothers and sisters, or anyone in this country. And that kind of solidarity, I think, is so important, and that's why I think it's so important for us to make sure that we're doing our part as well to talk about how our nation must confront the issues of systemic racism that are plaguing our Black brothers and sisters and others in so many different ways. So that's something that we all need to be working together for.
Wonderful. And another question from Ashley Kim, who is an 11th grader from, again, your home state is representing Congressman Kim, Ridgewood High School, who asked, what can we as second generation Korean Americans do to support peace on the Korean Peninsula?
Well, first of all, you're doing a big part right now by being a part of this type of forum. I mean, I wish I was, when I was younger and your age, I wish I was doing more to just make sure I was staying engaged. You're inspiring me by being on this on a Friday night to listen to what we're talking about and to be informed about what you can do. And I hope you take that information. I hope you think about it yourself, about what you believe. Don't take my word for it. Don't take the word of anybody on this call for it. Come up with your own decision about this. Come up with your own mind about what you think needs to happen. Be willing to challenge me. Be willing to challenge other people about what it is that we need to see happen in our politics across the board. Feel that empowerment. Feel that ability for your voice. Your voice in our democracy is every bit as important as my voice is. I want you to recognize that and feel emboldened by that. I hope you stay engaged. I hope you find different groups and communities for you to raise that and continue this debate. I hope you vote. I hope you get out there and encourage other people to vote. I hope you consider running for office one day or working in government one day, doing other things to show that anybody in this country or everybody in this country has as much of a right to try to have their voices heard as anybody else. Again, I'm not going to tell you, what that perfect 10-point plan is to fix this or that situation. But I want to stay in touch with you and work with you to try to hear about this, because, your generation is definitely going to be the ones that will inherit a lot of these issues. And, I'm just glad and grateful that you and others on this call, young folks, are already getting engaged and getting a head start, certainly on me, in terms of how to be able to fix these problems going forward.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so with that, we're actually going to go to our last question. So as it relates to, the high school kids doing what they're doing by showing up, we've got our last question from Rising Senior and founder of the Asian American Youth Council from Bergen County Technical High School in New Jersey, Brian Joan, who will actually be asking you a question directly. So Brian, put yourself off of mute and please ask the congressman your question.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian John, and I'm the founder of Asian American Youth Council. Last week, Assemblyman Kim quoted the former United States Ambassador John Bolton and said, "Some say neocon is the force that interferes with the declaration of the end of the Korean Peninsula." And I wanted to ask why the neocons have such a vested interest in thwarting peace and what the Korean government and its people, both in Korea and abroad, can do to help bring about a peaceful resolution.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Very thoughtful question. I'll be honest. I don't really know why, why people are trying to get in the way of peace. I'd like to hope that it's not because of different special interests and other things like that. But there are a lot of people that benefit from the status quo. A lot of people that benefit for how things are now. Or a lot of people that get very scared of change and what that can do to their personal or professional benefits, things like that. It's a very that's a very good question on this front. I try not to get caught up in trying to understand the psychology of how people approach these issues, whether neocons or others, but just try to think through it in terms of what it is that the consequences will be going forward if some of those actions were actually brought about. And I find that that's ultimately a better way to engage people and try to convince people of what a stronger way forward is just try to lay out for them in as clear detail as possible what those concrete consequences will be. And try to map that out so people understand what harm could come away or what benefit could come away of different policies on that front. I've been trying to do that with the work that I've done, throughout my entire national security career. So, I think you frame it right, and I think you're right to be concerned about that. But I also challenge you to not necessarily try to just think about it in terms of categories of thought. And try to make sure that pushback is being done on the specificity of the issues that are raised, and not just what school of thought or what political party people are coming from. We need to do a lot to just confront the actual issues that are at stake. And I find that the best ways to do that is from sort of a consequential approach of recognizing, what are the cost-benefit analysis of coming at it from that way. So I hope that's helpful. I mean, again, I'm not saying that I have the perfect way to do this, but I've certainly come across a large number of neocons and other people of other schools of thought over the course of my career in national security. And those are some of the lessons that I've learned on how best to try to raise and make a forceful argument and be persuasive in those situations.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for graciously answering so many questions from our community members. So, thank you so much. But I have something pretty special, and I'd like to share with you all a message from Congressman Kim's mom. So why don't you take it away?
안녕하십니까. 저는 Congressman 앤디 킴 엄마 됩니다. 저희가 이민을 와서 앤디가 이렇게 Congressman이 되었다는 게 너무나 꿈만 같고요. 또 앤디가 거기에 대해서 열정적으로 일을 할 수 있게 되어서 너무나 기쁩니다. 그리고 앤디가 또 20년 만에 코리안 아메리칸으로서 또 컨그레스맨이 된 그 자체가 너무나 자랑스럽고 제가 너무나 기쁩니다. 여러분들의 많은 후원과 성원이 있기를 바랍니다. 너무도 감사드립니다.
Very, very nice. So again, thank you so much. It was great actually hearing from your mom. So next we've got, Kapac has done a lot of very, very important work throughout this pandemic. And I'd like to now hand it over to Kapac's Assistant Executive Director, Mina Kim, who will actually share some highlights of what's been done throughout this pandemic.
With this coronavirus pandemic, members of Kapac have done many meaningful humanitarian activities. We have collected funds and donated N95 masks and PPEs. The generous donations are from members of Kapac as well as some community supporters of Kapac, whom agreed with our desire to assist the critical frontline responders at various hospitals and government agencies. We visited a community-based medical facilities such as UCLA Medical Center, Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital in African American community, Korean American Community Hospital, homeless shelters in LA, and City of Winter Park Police Station and other nursing homes to donate PPEs. Also, members in Seattle visited Harborview Hospital, and members in New York visited the Governor Cuomo's office to donate PPEs, also for frontline defenders. Through these campaigns, we were able to share what we have with those who are in desperate needs for safety. We also got many accolades and thank you letters, which expressed their gratitude and emotional tears as they relayed the message of how they were so passionately touched by our gesture of hospitality. These are remarkable public diplomatic activities Kapac has done during the time of pandemic. We also participated in Black Lives Matter protest with our community members, mainly Black and Hispanic community, to understand and address minority injustice in our daily lives as Americans. Currently, we are in the middle of another important humanitarian campaign, support COVID-19 response in North Korea. We have collected funds from members and supporters of Kapac. Our public relations director is contacting humanitarian aid organizations like UNICEF, which can deliver it directly to North Korea for medical aid. These actions should be, again, very influential and meaningful and humanitarian works of Kapac in this very challenging time of pandemic. Kapac has also supported the Census 2020 promotion with the city and county as a very important task for our community. Thank you, and please consider joining the activity of Kapac. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mina. And I'd like to next introduce to you Lee Jung-hwa, Public Relations Director of Kapac, who will be providing a report on the campaign to provide funds to UNICEF for COVID support for North Korea.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jung-hwa, and I'm the Public Relations Director at Kapac. Regarding the funds raised from our recent campaign to provide COVID-19 humanitarian support to North Korea, we reached out to American Red Cross and UNICEF to donate the funds. The American Red Cross was unable to accept our donation because the American Red Cross must be asked in a formal appeal by a country's Red Cross Society or requested on behalf of the International Federation of the Red Cross to fundraise for another country in response to a disaster or emergency. According to the Red Cross representative that we spoke with, such an international appeal was not in a place for North Korea for COVID-19 in the States, so therefore they could not accept the donation. However, we were able to connect with UNICEF U.S. Fund Senior Director, Anne-Marie Griffin in Washington, D.C., and we are excited to announce that UNICEF will accept our donation to provide COVID-19 humanitarian assistance to North Korea. And we are currently in the process of scheduling a date to deliver a physical check to UNICEF's regional office in Los Angeles. UNICEF is also interested in building a long-term relationship with Kapac, and we'll be discussing a potential opportunity to execute an MOU with UNICEF for our future projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now actually take a moment. So thank you so much. having people like, Congressman Andy Kim and Marilyn Strickland here, which is so amazing. And I'd like to actually recognize some other special guests that we have here, people who are running for office and people who are currently in office. And first and foremost, it's really about working in close collaboration with other members, especially of the Asian American Pacific Islander community. And I'd like to take a moment to recognize a person who will be running for mayor for the city of Irvine, Farah Khan. Irvine 시장님 후보입니다. So Farah Khan, can you just say a very few words?
Sure. Thank you so much, Tammy. It's an honor to be here. And what a great group. And it was a pleasure seeing Congressman Kim again. I've learned so much during this Q&A session on this call, and look forward to not only supporting peace in Korea, but also supporting Korean Americans here. So I'm glad to be here with you today.
Thanks so much, Farah. And the next person we have here who I want to recognize is actually someone who's also really important, not only to myself, she is like a role model that I look up to. Representative Cindy Rue, who's running for a 6th term in the state of Washington for the Washington legislature. She just won her she made it through the primary, I think at a whopping 64%. She will still need to run. Another thing is she actually serves as the head of the Korean American worldwide diaspora political community. So congratulations, Representative Cindy Rue. Can you just say a few words to us here?
Yes, thank you so very much, Tammy. What a wonderful forum this is. Really enjoyed listening to Congressman Kim again, and I am really hoping that that Marilyn is able to join him in Congress, and she will become the very first, in addition to being a Korean American, she's also a Black person, I guess, and so she will be making history. And so looking forward to November 3rd here in Washington State. So the Overseas Korean Politicians Forum includes elected and appointed electeds from all over the world, and we try to get together at least every year. And unfortunately, we were supposed to meet in July, and we keep delaying it. We may have to meet virtually this year, but hopefully we will be able to get together again. We have a great time together because when we are not competing for a particular position, we're able to actually celebrate being ethnic Koreans, and it's like mini UN when we get together, and we have so much fun. So I hope you get elected. Every one of you get elected. Tammy, you have to win, and then we can keep inviting you back. Nice to meet you all.
Yes, thank you so much. And if you have not done so already, please look at completing the 2020 census. It is very important for us. It is very important for the Korean American community. And I will go ahead in the chat box and put a link. So in case you haven't done it, and please make sure, especially the Asian American young leaders here, make sure you please let your parents know, let your grandparents know, and help spread the word. We're counting on you as young leaders to help spread the word about the 2020 census. And so let me now pass it off to Che 대표님, who will recognize other distinguished guests as we close out the meeting. Thank you so much.
Okay.
대표님. 네.
Mute, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tammy. What a wonderful MC you have been doing for 2 sessions. Thank you so much. I appreciate your help. I'm so grateful to see more than 260 people joined in Zoom link. It's like a record high. And about several hundred YouTube live from Nail newspaper in Korea for this event this time, same time. It's amazing. It's amazing to this big participant. This is because Andy, and this is because power all together. So I also specifically thank you to young next generation from AAYC in New Jersey and some young generation from San Francisco and Boston area. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. And let me recognize some distinguished guests before we go. I apologize, but there are so many figures, as I said, more than 250, but right now, even in this time, 180 left. So let me just go by just screen order for those still in attendance. But first of all, I should mention the special guest, the young next generation, the AAYC, the Asian American Youth Council member. Let me introduce. Originally founded by a current high school student, Brian John, AAYC established in response to an incident at Bergen County academics over a teacher's anti-Korean racist remark. Quote, "I hate Korean," quote. This incident led youth council from all over New Jersey to come together in hopes to address various current issues, such as race and gender, which have significantly undermined the well-being and status of our community. The council focused on raising social awareness about political rights, which most of our AAYC's previous Asian American generations have not been able to enjoy. Rather than representing the need of a single ethnicity Korean, they are combining all the power from all American, Asian American community to create one unified, righteous, justice voice. Thank you so much for your effort. And then I can see big hope from your attitude and your passion and your enthusiasm. Thank you so much. Why don't we give them big hand applaud? Okay, let me just go by screen order today. It will take just 5 minutes and then I'm gonna let you go. Okay, Eun Jung, the Next Generation Committee Director, and Tammy Kim, raise your hand and shake your hand. And Mina Kim, and Chris Kim, the Chairman of Kapac, Consul General 박경재, LA 총영사관님, 정승덕 from San Francisco, 오은영 from LA, Marilyn Strickland from Tacoma, Brian John, 정화 Lee, 이천화 CPA from Korea, Professor Kim Dong-yeon from DC, Jang Won-sam, Ambassador Jang Won-sam from New York. Thank you so much for your excellent remark today. Mr. Farah Khan, thank you so much for participation.
Yay.
Thank you. And Cindy Liu. Okay, Hae-young Park. Kim Myung-gyun from LA. Albert from AAYC. Wow, the journalist in Nail newspaper. Kim Ki-soo, thank you. Jong-hun Kim from Kapac. Senior advisor from 도산 안창호 기념사업관 이종훈. 조나단 김 목사님. New Jersey City College 이은수 Professor 이은수 교수님. 이원익 사장님 from LA. Attorney Ginny Lee, you are in Seoul. You are not in Orange County. Christine Choi from AAYC. You have a great question today. Ashley Kim from AAYC. Audrey Cha from AAYC. Freeman Lee, Vice President of Kapac. 이승우 변호사님. 서지원 from AAYC. Eunice Lee from AAYC. Brenda Kim from AAYC.
여기가 몇십 명 되는 것 같아요.
Lin Her from AAYC. 안병진 교수님, 우리 경희대 유명하신 우리 외교안보 전문가 교수님이신데 오늘 참석하셔서 감사합니다. Thank you so much, Professor An from Kyunghee University, the same University of President Moon. 박신화 목사님 from LA. Thank you. 강주연 선생님 from San Francisco, right? Yes. Andy John from AAYC. Leah from AAYC. Jimin Kim from AAYC. Justin Kim from San Francisco Pyeongtaek. Kim Dong-yeon from San Francisco. 이유진 from Washington DC. 유진 사장님. Fred Lim from AAYC. Bob Gopsik, Vice President of Kapac in LA. Thank you. 와, 김근상 대주교님 from 성공회 in Seoul. Thank you so much. Wow, 원혜경 선생님 from AAYC. 정민 Choi from AAYC. 양승희 원장님 from San Francisco. The Senior Advisor of Kapac, Professor Kwak Tae-hwan. Thank you so much. Ho Chi Minh, owner we mentioned like several, Vietnam have mentioned several times from Vietnam. Kim Nam-jong 회장님, thank you so much. Helena So from AAYC. Rachel Beck from San Francisco Pyeongtaek Junior. Rachel Koo, thank you. Charlie, AAYC. Wow, 이종미 형사님, thank you so much. Consul in LA Consulate, 이종미 형사님, thank you. 박미정 from San Francisco, former president of COWIN. Vice President of Kapac, Lee Hae-jung. Far from here, Professor Moon from Boston. Thank you so much. Daniel from AAYC. Ha-jun Park from AAYC. Sharon Kim from AAYC. Boston Pyeongtaek, Honorable President of Han-Sun-woo, thank you so much. Kevin Bae from AAYC. From Calgary, Canada. Joseph Yun 사장님, thank you. Patrick Kim from AAYC. Songjun Moon from AAYC. Yeonji Lee from AAYC. Jane Lim from AAYC. Thank you. Han Hyun-suk from Philadelphia. Thank you. Jenny Cho from Seattle. Rachel Yoon, our 여성위원장 of Kapac, Rachel Yoon, thank you. Jiyoon Kim from AAYC, thank you. Paul Jung from AAYC. Hyo Kim, thank you. Hyo-jung Kim. Wow, our board member of Kapac, Hyo-jung Kim, thank you so much. Ha-jun Park from AAYC. Fred Kim from AAYC. Seattle 늘 푸른 연대 성파. Thank you so much. Evan from San Francisco, thank you. Brian, Sean Yun, Daniel Choi, Kim Sun-mi from Qingdao, China, thank you. From Korea, the Kaesong Industrial Complex Owners Organization, Vice President, Lee Jong-dok 사장님, thank you so much. I hope Kaesong Industrial Complex will be open very soon. Andrew, Jonathan Lee, Lee Sun-young, Stefan, Jong Kim, Byung-hun, La Hee-sin, Jennifer Huang, Stella Park, Se-jung Kwon, Tyler. Hi, thank you so much, Tyler. Yeah, we have Andy's financial director, Tyler Sedonis, from his district. Thank you so much for all the preparation with Andy for this time. Thank you. 최태호 북부 한인회장님, 이내운 민주평통 상임위원님, thank you so much. We have just 2 screens left. If 동킴, 감사합니다. 주완수 from Korea, 종님, 최유정, 헬레노, 케이리 주, 김병현, 최은정, 케이리 은주, 강태원 부회장님, 알렌청, 수미, Michael, the city council member, Sonny Park, city of Buena Park council member, Sonny Park, thank you so much for your participation. Andrew Lee, Nathaniel Lee, Joe Peck, 박동호 보좌관님, thank you. 이희경 선생님, 이강선, 엘린 리, 신민, 다영신. Yes, so many, there are so many. Thank you so much for your participation. Yeah, let me make some final remarks. Thank you so much for Congressman Andy for the wonderful speech and questions and answers. I hope all is well for you and your campaign. And I believe you will be there by big margin in November. Thank you, folks. Please stay safe and healthy. Wear face mask. Keep social distancing. Please hang in there and take care of your family. Have a good night. And then let me hand over to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending here. Thank you for being present for the 4th series. Thank you, future Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland. Please help her get into Congress. We need her. Annie needs help. We all need help. So let's make sure this happens. Let's make sure we get her in. And so thank you, everyone, for being present. I know it's late in the East Coast, almost 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, now recording has ceased, and I'm going to turn back on ability for everybody to unmute. So anyone who wishes to unmute and carry on a conversation, you have the ability right now.
Thank you.
수고하셨습니다.
네,
우리 회장님 고생 많이 했어. 우리 은호정 씨 감사합니다. 태미, thank you very much. You have done good job. Excellent job. 김 교수님, 예, 반갑습니다.